Okay everyone, it's finally time for the PSX or PlayStation Retroid Pocket 3 Plus settings guide. And I've been told that these guides are also useful for other Android emulation users, so if you're one of those, welcome to the channel, and don't forget to subscribe. This video specifically covers the emulator Duckstation. There are many others you could choose from, and I'm not saying that they're wrong or bad, but this is the one I prefer, and this is the one I'm going to teach you about in this video. So let's just go ahead and get started. The very first thing I should point out is probably down here, the Import BIOS button. You want to click there and then select wherever you've got your BIOS file saved. I can't tell you where to obtain that, but I will say I prefer the PSX on PSP BIOS, and if you search that, I bet you'll find it. Just so you know, you can click that button to refresh your games, or you can just pull down on the list and it will scan in whichever ones you've added to your folder. Now let's jump into the controller settings, because I have continually had people commenting saying they've struggled to get their controller working in Duckstation. I'm not really sure why, so I'm going to take you through and let you look at all of my settings. I keep my controller type set to analog or DualShock because with the right other settings, Duckstation will disable that for games where it won't work. And it will do that for you automatically, so you shouldn't really need to change it. And now, just so you can see, I'm going to go ahead and clear all of my joystick bindings, and then I'm going to set them up again exactly the way I use them so you can see what I do. If this doesn't work for you, then I guess I'm just a little confused, because I've never actually had any troubles with this working once I've gone through this process. And that does it for the bindings. You can see I also choose these two settings to enable analog on reset, and also to allow the analogs to be used as digital buttons. And other than that, I really just keep all these settings at default, but you can feel free to tweak them if you find something isn't quite to your liking. I don't tend to use hotkeys with this emulator because the PlayStation DualShock controller already has the exact same number of buttons as the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, but if you want to, you could set one of the sticks as fast forward. I'm doing that just for the purposes of this video. I wouldn't suggest it, but most PlayStation games will not use the L3 or R3 button, so it's generally safe. But that concludes the controller setup. So let's jump back out and go into the app settings and take a look there. In the general tab, I keep most of these settings set at their default. I do like to turn fast boot on. I don't need to see that PlayStation boot logo. I also love save state on exit so that I can always feel safe just jumping back into a game where I left off. Obviously, we do want the hardware renderer to be Vulkan now that we're on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. And if you have a Mali GPU, you probably want the same. Now, here in display, I do keep my aspect ratio set to auto match display, and that's because I have a 16:9 screen and I want to try to make most of these games use widescreen hacks to look better. Don't use downsampling, and I don't use integer scaling, although if you were primarily playing 2D games, I understand why you would. Linear upscaling is turned on, and also expand to cutout area, although really on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus we don't have a cutout area, but if you're on a phone you probably do. I have show messages turned on so that I know when it's changing a setting for me automatically, and all these next things are really just performance related notifiers so that I can monitor performance while I'm testing these games. But none of those settings really impact performance, they're just about personal preference. And now you can take a look at how I have my audio settings. Not a lot there to change. In the Enhancements tab is where we get to the really important things. A lot of games would run fine at 4 and even 5x resolution, but I'm going to tell you to set it to 3x because I find the difference in quality is not that big, and I want to set it and forget it sort of situation. Every game, or almost every game at least, will play fine at 3x. some at 4 and 5, but not most. I leave multi-sampling turned off because I've actually found that it degrades the look of a lot of games. I don't know if it's a bug, but I will show you what it looks like. It's also a big performance hit anyway. You can turn these next 3 options on, the third of which is the most important. You definitely want it running in progressive mode because you're effectively doubling the number of pixels on screen at one time. You're not really going to improve PlayStation textures much, so I just leave it set to nearest neighbor. I love my widescreen hacks personally, so I turn that on, and I only turn it off specifically for games where it doesn't look good, or say a 2D game where it just serves no purpose and breaks the game. And you definitely want these 3 PGXP options turned on. They really help improve the look of most PlayStation games by fixing the wobble in the polygons and the textures. The 4th one, however, I leave turned off. Most games don't need it, and it can break the graphics in some games. You can also safely leave that 5th PGXP option turned off, as it says it's a big performance hit. And that really does it for the Enhancements tab. But over here in the Achievements tab is where you would control retro achievements. I'll leave that up to you. I don't use them, but this is where you would turn them on if you wanted to. And finally, we have the Advanced tab. I turn on the first one so that I can load patches for games that need it, and the second one so that the emulator will turn off settings that might break certain games, like, for example, the analog joystick. You want sustained performance mode turned on because, after all, we're playing on a game machine, not a phone. No need to conserve any of our power. These next 3 settings should also, of course, be turned on for better performance. And you definitely want to use the software renderer for readbacks. I will specifically show you the difference that can make in a game so you understand why we turn that on. I also have audio sync and audio resampling turned on because why not? It should result in better audio quality. These next few settings I leave at their defaults, but you can see what those are in case you've accidentally changed some of them. And you will want these CPU recompiler options turned on as well. Both of these threaded GPU settings should also be turned on. Since we are using the Vulkan renderer, we do get better performance that way. PGXP Vertex cache should also usually be turned on. However, the CPU mode should usually be off. However, there's at least one game that I know of that can benefit from it, and here you can take a look at the rest of the options in that tab, including the last one, which primarily relates to having multiple disc games set up as a playlist, and that's what I will show you how to do next. Let's take Xenogears here as an example. You can see I've got both discs, and I also have an M3U file. And I will show you on the screen what that M3U file would look like. You can create it on your computer and then put it in the same directory as your games. And you can see it's just a list of all the discs in the game with their exact file names. However, once you have an M3U file, you can launch the game by clicking that, and then you can swipe over and choose to change the disk. And you'll see you'll get a list of those disks. So just to show you how it works, I'm going to switch to disk 2, and you can see that it worked because when I try to start a new game, it tells me to insert disk 1. So I'm definitely on disk 2. Now I can come back in, change disk, back to disk 1, and it will automatically start the game because it recognizes that I've inserted the correct disk. It isn't always necessary to do this for multi-disc games for all systems. For example, on the Dreamcast, Redream stores perpetual VMUs, and so your save games can easily be recognized no matter which disk you load. However, in the case of Duckstation, it creates a new memory card for every game you load. And that becomes a problem because disk 1 and disk 2 have separate names and therefore separate memory cards, but launching them from the M3U file means they share a memory card and you can easily swap disks. Problem solved. Unfortunately, if you're wanting to see me play Xenogears, too bad, it takes way too long to get into the game, so instead, let's jump straight into one of my personal favorites, Rage Racer. And this game is a perfect example for why you need to have software render for readbacks turned on. Because if you don't, you get the problem that I've seen a lot of people complain about when you hit the tunnels. There it is starts to chug every single time. But not a big deal, as long as we go ahead and turn that option back on. Now Rage Racer will run beautifully at 3x resolution with widescreen hacks on. And I will say that all of these games are running at 3x unless I mention otherwise. And let's check out that tunnel. Smooth as butter. As promised, tunnels are no longer a problem at all. This is still probably my favorite game in the entire Ridge Racer series, but I've got a lot of others to show you, so let's move on. Tail Concerto was one requested by Zach Zevius, and for this one, you want to long press on the game and do game properties. You can't change every setting in this section, which is frustrating, but for this game, you do want to make sure PGXP Vertex cache is turned on. I say that because Zach Zevius in the comments specifically mentioned that for this game there's a lot of polygon clipping, and it seems to be this option or this setting that is the primary one that gets it working better. Now, I've never played this game before, but I definitely noticed some clipping in the opening scenes before I turned that setting on. And now at 3x, it really does look quite nice. And I've got to say, this is one I'll probably be checking out again later on my own time. Austin Gibbs in the comments requested to see Ape Escape, so here it is. Again, of course, running at 3x resolution. You can see it looks great. This is one game where you do need the L3 and R3 buttons on your sticks, so you definitely don't want to have either of them configured as hotkeys if you're playing Ape Escape. And CC wanted to see how Armored Core runs, and good news is it runs great at 3x. Bad news is the controls aren't exactly intuitive for someone who's never played this game before, so you'll just have to forgive the poor gameplay demonstration that you're witnessing. Absolutely no one requested to see Castlevania Symphony of the Night, and for that I say shame on you, but I still wanted to pop in and show it to you for just a little bit so that you can see that while it struggled at 2x on the Retroid Pocket 3, especially when you're killing these dire wolves, it runs fine now at 3x on the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. For my money, Einhander is one of the prettiest and most underrated PlayStation games. I want you to take a look at how bright and vivid it is here. However, if we go into the game properties and turn on MSAA, and it doesn't seem to matter how much MSAA we turn on, suddenly the game has a sort of dark overlay across all of it. And that's really no good. This game needs those bright colors. I noticed this happen in several games when I tried turning on MSAA. I don't know if it's a bug or if it's working as intended, but don't use MSAA. Once I turned it off, you can immediately see how much brighter the game is. It looks the way it should look. Enjoy Einhander the way it was meant to be, and don't use MSAA. Medal of Honor also comes to you courtesy of a request by Austin Gibbs, and you'll be pleased to see that it does run perfect now at 3x, although I really don't like the default control scheme in this game. The odd mixing of the movement stick with the looking stick is just weird to me. And I just have to show you R4, Ridge Racer Type 4, because to me this is one of the prettiest games on the original PlayStation, and it looks absolutely fantastic running at this resolution in widescreen. I think it's starting to look like a very early PlayStation 2 game at this point. And the Ridge Racer Turbo Mode bonus disc that was included with R4 is another one that really pushed the PlayStation to its limits, because finally Ridge Racer was running on PlayStation at 60 frames per second. This is actually also running at 4x native resolution, which is huge, and it looks beautiful. Spider-Man doing the things a spider can, and looking a lot better doing them now thanks to upscaling and the general style of this game faring so well when upscaled. This one was requested by Neil Smith, so Neil, I've got you covered.
Spider sense tingling. Something's going on here. I need to use my Spidey compass to find the bank. I'm already at full health.
One thing I noticed about this game when I was testing it is that now, thanks to upscaling, the game itself looks better than the pre-rendered cinematics. So, technology, folks. Tekken 3 was another game that really pushed the PlayStation to its limits, so I wanted to showcase it for a minute here. Although I'm really not sure how Namco never got sued by the estate of Bruce Lee for this character. Because, come on, that's Bruce Lee. Tobal 2 was another fighting game that really pushed the PlayStation. In fact, I think it was running at the PlayStation's highest resolution mode and in progressive scan originally. So now at 3x that resolution, it's actually higher resolution than the screen of the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus. And here's Tomba for Parasite Adam, who didn't request Parasite Eve, oddly enough. It seems to run well, even in widescreen, although there is a bit of an issue with some things disappearing on the very edges of the screen, or especially at the beginning of the stage. And you'll have to forgive me, I've never played this game, so I have no clue what I'm doing, but it does run well at 3x, so here you go. And as everyone knows, any showcase needs to have a Wipeout game. Unfortunately, Wipeout 3 has some issues running in widescreen. You can see there on the edges of the screen there's a lot of polygon clipping. But thankfully, Wipeout XL has no such issues. So this one's for you, Kyle Ruggles. Your request wasn't too late. And that will do it for this PlayStation settings guide for the Retroid Pocket 3 Plus, and of course, hopefully useful for all of you Android users in general. Although I couldn't cover every game that was requested, and I especially avoided RPGs because I'm sorry, I'm not spending an hour just trying to get into the game. I tried to cover every setting that I've found that really seems to make a difference in the performance of games. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful, and if you did, please do consider liking, commenting, subscribing, clicking the bell, all that good stuff, and I will see you back here for the next settings guide. But until then, just keep gaming.